we'll make sure you get one. Can you make sure people get handouts for me, Randy? Thank you. If you need a handout, put your hand out. Just to let you know, they are in the back and on the doors on your way in. So just for future reference. So one of the difficult types of people are the people that don't get their handouts. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Don't want you to be mad. That's another difficult person. They get mad real easily. For those of you who were here last week, we'll catch up. This was intended to be one lesson, but I guess we took so much time, it became 2 lessons. Let everybody come in and get settled here. And she needs a handout. All right, if you didn't get your handout, put your hand out because we got to keep Randy busy. He stays out of trouble that way. So, all right. Well, very good. It's so good to see everybody here. We are actually streaming this stuff, which is kind of interesting to me because I got 2 phone calls last Wednesday night about my Holy Spirit class. And it was from people that were streaming the class, and they had questions that they wanted to make sure that we put in the class to get answered. So if anybody's watching streaming this morning, hi. We're glad that you're with us, I guess. But this is all so weird. Have any of y'all ever watched yourself and listened to yourself on camera? I hate it. I sound like such a hick. And I know in real life I don't sound that way. Kathy Griss is back there saying, oh yes you do. She is a sniper. Okay? She's one of the difficult people that we have to deal with. We talked about difficult people last week. If you were here, you remember we talked about, let's see, the sniper. That was the person that takes shots at you, like Kathy just did. Then you got the whiners. Those are the people that complain about everything. Then you got the volcanoes. Those are the people that blow up. You got the bullies that push people around. You got the I know best, the know-it-alls. They have a superiority complex. Wanda, we can start anywhere on this list. And then we've got the downers. That's the negative people. And the gossips, the yes person, the undecided, and then the silent person. And that's the person that won't deal with the situation at its hand. Last week we talked about 7 ways. We started the class on talking about 7 ways to deal with your difficult people in your life. And the very number 1 thing was to pray for them. And we use Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 through 44. And what I want you to see in this passage, and I want to quickly touch on this, when you pray for people, and if you look at this, it says, when you love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, you are doing something very counterintuitive. And one of the things that I have come to find out about my walk with God is my normal, natural reaction is usually wrong. If I'm starting to get upset, 9 times out of 10, me getting upset is the wrong answer to what I'm doing. If I'm wanting to be vengeful, all of these things that come up naturally to us are always wrong. And I think that's the reason why a lot of us in the church have a hard time, because we fight our natural instincts. We fight the natural man in order to be a spiritual man, and a lot of us don't want to do that. In case you haven't heard from my accent, I grew up in the South. People come to me, where are you from? I always say Boston. Throws them really off. But what's really funny is when I tell people that and they go, really? But anyway, in the South, growing up in the area that I grew up with, everybody fought. I mean, that was just kind of like what kids did. We fought quite a bit. My older brother broke my nose twice. First time it went this way, second time it went back. So it worked out okay for me. I mean, you know, we just fought. And that is the natural man. As you mature, you don't do those kinds of things. So the second thing we talked about is to refuse to be offended. And we talked about the fact that you can control your emotions. You can control your emotions. A person who says they cannot control their emotions has something wrong with them. And that's the very first thing, is you are in control of your emotions. You need to understand that your reaction is up to you, it's not up to them. If you let somebody else control your emotions, you're not in control of yourself. Number 3, don't expect an apology, just forgive. And actually had somebody come up to me after service and said, you know, Neil, I'm not so sure that that's what we're taught biblically, because when we're taught, you know, how many times should I forgive someone? What does the Bible say when Jesus was asked how many times we should forgive somebody? 70 times 70. And how many of you go around and count? All right, that's 1. That's 2. That's 3. And get up to 7 times 70. Has anybody ever gotten there? And I think what we do is we look at the Bible and we want the Bible to relate to how we are as the natural man and not the spiritual man. When I say don't expect an apology, just forgive, why would we do that? Why would you just forgive people and not expect an apology? Kathy's got some sign language going on here. Because of your relationship with God. Anybody else? What's that? Because God forgave us? If we hold hatreds and vengeance in our heart, we can't have this relationship, so the forgiveness is for us. I'm here to tell you, when you forgive people and you forgive them without an apology, that is when you are most Christ-like. And there is something freeing about forgiving people when you need to forgive them. You see, the nice thing about coming into worship on Sunday morning when you have forgiven everybody in your life that's done you wrong is you don't come in with all that baggage. When I come in on Sunday morning and I'm partaking of the Lord's Supper, one of the very first things I do before we even get started good is I just say, all right, God, is there anybody I need to reconcile with? Is there anybody that I need to forgive? Because before I go into this holy communion, before I get to this point in the worship where I am focusing on what God did for me, I want to be completely free from any negative emotions, any negative things in my life, so that I can worship a holy God. And the problem with a lot of us is we come in here on Sunday morning and we've got this negativity, this unforgiveness, this hard heart, and we come before the Lord and we come in here and we worship and nothing changes. If you come in here every week and you worship and nothing changes in your life, you don't try to do better, you don't try to become more like God, more like Christ in your life, it's because your heart is hard. And it may very well be that your heart is hard because you've got people that you need to forgive. Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. The fourth one is refuse to gossip. Don't get caught up with it. Just make sure if somebody comes to you and is wanting to gossip, you just look at them and say, is it okay that I tell them what you told me? And 9 times out of 10, people will quit talking to you about things like that. Now, this is where we stopped last week, right? And this is where a lot of us have a problem. The fifth one is don't stoop to their level. Now, I told you when I was growing up, I have 2 brothers and a sister. And we didn't get along. We did, but we didn't. And there was always somebody that had something going on with somebody. And one of the funniest things as I'll ever remember is I was sitting downstairs and I heard my sister yell, "Mom! Jim's in my room!" And I'm like, wow, that's pretty intense. And Mom says, Jim's my older brother, "Jim, get out of her room." "I'm not in her room, Mom, I'm just at the door." Beth yells, "His big toe is in my room, Mom!" The number one thing you heard from us whenever we would be fighting with each other, and if you ever hear me say fight nice, that was my mom's phrase to us. Fight nice, kids, fight nice. But the thing of it is, the number one phrase you heard when we were defending our actions was, "He started it." He started it. Now, as children, you can probably relate to that. And you think, that's silly, right? But as adults, we do it all the time. We do it in our marriages. We do it with our kids. We do it with each other. If he's going to be that way with me, then I'm going to be this way with them. I mean, we do it all the time. We justify what we're doing by stooping to the other person's level. Look at Matthew chapter 22, verses 15 through 20. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him with his words. Now, you guys know this story. I mean, the Pharisees were always looking for a chance to trap Jesus. They were snipers. They were looking for ways to catch Jesus saying or doing something wrong all the time. And so he instead of stooping to their level, they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. "Teacher," they said, "we know that you're a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Now, I want you to notice something here about this kind of difficult person. Is they built Jesus up. They told him all of these good things about him in order to trap him. Now, I want you to see that because this is a very tricky, difficult person that Jesus is dealing with. Now, Jesus obviously knew their hearts because it says in the next verse on page number 3, but Jesus, knowing their evil intent. And you don't always have that in your playbook when you're dealing with difficult people, but when you've been caught by this person once, or you've had this happen to you before, then you can know that people a lot of times have evil intent in their heart. He said, but Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me?" Now, there have been people who have asked me questions, and since I have been a preacher, I have learned certain questions are always a trap. And I'm not going to tell you which ones they are because you're going to come and ask me. You know what a trap question is? Honey, does this dress make me look fat? That's a trap question. There is no way you're getting out of that one any way at all. I have a friend of mine, and his wife asked him that, and they needed marriage counseling. That's how I found out about this. But his wife asked him, says, honey, does this dress make me look fat? And he looked at her and he says, no, you're just fat. I'm like, dude. Of course, Jesus goes on to say, show me the coin used paying for the tax. They brought him a denarius, and he asked, whose portrait is this and whose inscription? And of course, he got out of their trap. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 2 says, whether we have renounced the secret and shameful ways, we do not use deception, nor do we distort the word of God. On the contrary, by setting forth truth plainly, we commend ourselves to every man's conscience in sight of God. And that's what we need to do, is we need to make sure that we are not stooping to their level, not playing their games, because what you do is when you stoop to their level and play their games, you become just like them. My dad has a phrase that I've used several times. It says, never get in a mud wrestling match with a pig. He says, all that's going to happen is you're going to get muddy and the pig enjoys it. And that's kind of true with people. You get down in the mud with people, they enjoy being in the mud, and all you do is you get dirty. And this kind of goes along, the next one kind of goes along with that. Refuse to be manipulated. Refuse to be manipulated. How many of you have somebody in your life that can push your buttons? How many of you are sitting next to that person? No, don't raise your hand. Don't raise your hand. But seriously, don't we have people in our lives that can just push our buttons? And they just seem to enjoy pushing our buttons, right? They just seem to enjoy doing it. How many of you have been driving along? This is a good one. How many of you have ever been driving along and you think the person in front of you is intentionally driving so that they make you mad? How many of you have been that person in front and have intentionally driven to make people mad? Shame on you! Shame on you. I've done it too. But it was a long time ago and I repented, so it's okay. But there's going to be people in your life that can really push your buttons, amen? It could be a child, it could be a parent, it could be a daughter, it could be a son-in-law. Have I missed anybody? It could be a preacher that pushes your buttons. But the thing of it is you've got to refuse to be manipulated. Romans chapter 14, verse 16. Do not allow what you consider good to be spoken of as evil. And then in Galatians 5:1, for it is the freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. And what I'm wanting you to see here is if you're doing the right thing and you're trying to be the right kind of person, you don't need to be manipulated. Matthew chapter 15, verses 12 through 14. Then Jesus came to him and asked, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this? I want you to underline that. Do you know the Pharisees were offended when they heard this? And the reason why I want you to underline that is because from time to time, guess what? I offend people. And I offend them the same way that Jesus offends people. And in this world that we live in today, if you're going to be a Christian, you're going to be offensive. There was a time being a Christian, I feel like, that there was a time that when being a Christian was not very offensive because most of this nation understood Judeo-Christian values. Today, we are a minority. And when you say that you don't believe gay marriage is correct, you're offensive. When you say that homosexuality is wrong, you are offensive. When you tell couples that they should not be living together before marriage, you are offensive. When you tell teenagers that just because marijuana is legal in a particular state does not make it a thing Christians should do, you are offensive. And I don't want to be offensive, and we live in a world where it talks about you have the right to do anything but offend me, right? I mean, that's the thing. I can believe anything I want, but you can't believe what you want. And when I have firm truths in my life, firm foundations on the gospel, that is offensive to some people. I don't want to be offensive, but it is offensive. Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this? He replied, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them. They are blind guides. If a blind man leads a blind man, both will fall into a pit." I want you to see this because I struggle with this. Our culture has made so many things acceptable. I will never forget a teenage girl coming to me, and she took offense to the fact that I said something about homosexuality being wrong. And she said, it's such a small, she was defending it. She says, it's such a small part of their life. Why do you pick on it? I'm like, first of all, I'm not picking on it. But, and I went on to say, being a murderer is something that only happens every once in a while. It's just such a small part of their life. Why should we pick on murderers? And of course, she didn't get it. But you know what the sad thing of that was? And nobody in this church knows these folks because this has happened several years ago. So don't be looking at anybody saying, well, I know who said that. This happened years ago. This was an elder's daughter. This is an elder's daughter. Because truth is offensive. And we need to understand that. But we don't need to be manipulated by the world. And this is number 7. Is really tough because this is the one thing that I stress over and over. I don't know how many people I have told this to lately that have come to me for counsel, but I have stressed this over and over and over. And here's what it is. You do the right thing no matter what. You do the right thing no matter what. Even when it's not fair. Even when it's not fair, you do the right thing. And when I say it's not fair, sometimes people will take advantage of you. People will take advantage of your goodness. Even when it's not fair, you do the right thing. And when you make a promise to somebody and it doesn't turn out that you don't have all the facts, you can't go back and say, well, I made this promise, but I don't have all the facts. You do the right thing even when it's not fair. You do the right thing even when it hurts. You do the right thing even when it hurts. And that means sometimes doing the right thing means that it's not an easy thing for you to do. I was talking to someone recently, and I had to just flat out tell them they were wrong about something. And that they needed to go and they needed to apologize, and the other person was right. And when after I told them that, I was concerned because I thought, well, that's pretty rough stuff that I said, and I just want to make sure they were okay, they were all right. And you know what? It hurts sometimes to go back and say, I was wrong. Anybody like to go around saying I was wrong? Anybody in here from time to time need to go around and say I was wrong? And when you're wrong, you need to admit it and you need to clean up that mess. And here's the third thing about you need to do the right thing no matter what, is you need to do it even when it costs you money or materials or things. You need to do the right thing no matter what, even when it costs. I think a lot of times we value our money more than we do our relationship. Our relationships with God, our relationship with others. And I can tell you that money, there's a lot of scriptures that talk about money. And money is one of those things that I think that's keeping a lot of people from becoming what they need to be in God. And I'm not saying that because you have money, you're not the right person. What I'm saying is you need to make sure that you are using the resources God gave you to further His kingdom, because everything that we have here on this earth is God's. And He's given us to us for our enjoyment and to benefit the rest of the world. Amen? So do the right thing no matter what, even when it's not fair, even when it hurts, even when it costs. Romans 12:14, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. And we talked about this a little bit last week about how we can use our resources to help other people. Romans 12:17 and 18 says, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Now, I love this verse because I try to live at peace with everyone. But I'm going to tell you, there are some people that just don't want to have peace with you. You do your best. And no matter how hard you try, Wanda Barton may still not like you. Okay? No, I'm just teasing Wanda. But no matter how hard you try, there may be somebody that you cannot live at peace with because they don't want to live at peace with you for whatever reason. I got so tickled at one of our members. She's a new Christian. And when I said something in service about there are people, members of this church that hate me, she started laughing. And then when she realized she was the only one laughing, she thought, surely there's not people in here that hate Neil. I'm thinking to myself, I've been around the block long enough. I know that there's people that don't like me. Now, I don't understand it. What is there about me that's not so lovable? Is it because I'm too abrupt? Maybe. Is it because I'm a little arrogant at times? Yes, definitely. Is it because I'm too happy? Probably. There are so many things about me that I can see why people wouldn't like me, but at the same time, I also think that I'm kind of cuddly at times. My point being is this: no matter how hard you try, you're going to have somebody in your life you can't live at peace with, but it's still up to you to do the right thing. Romans 12:21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And then Proverbs 16:7, when a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, he makes even his enemies live at peace with him. And I think that should be our goal. When we have an enemy, we should make them live at peace with us. Any comments or questions so far? I got tickled. I've been getting phone calls this week, people giving me other people that are difficult people to live by. It's like that. Well, I understand. But go ahead. Yes, Ron.
This, as far as it depends on you, Romans 12, 17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
I have been forgiving somebody even though they will not apologize.
All right.
Letting them hold you are in that state.
I don't know if y'all heard that in the back, and I'm sorry if you did. I have to repeat it because the camera doesn't pick up this stuff. But Ron Moore says that this verse is, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. He says that goes back to the idea of forgiving people even when they don't apologize, because you release that and you're not at war with anybody. You're at peace with everybody. They're not at peace with you, but you're at peace with everybody. That pretty much sum it up, Ron? Okay, good. All right, anybody else? I am such a good teacher. I've just got it all covered. Oh, Toby. Toby's in the back there. Do I have the additional ones? Or the 10? You got last week's notes, right? All right, well, here you go. This is this week's note, and you got the 10 difficult. She is writing your names beside those right now. I saw her list, and she's got a list there, so be careful. Anybody else? Any other questions, comments? Yes, Diane. All right, it's a good question. Are there some people, I think you said, that you can't relate to, and and they're not in your life all the time, do you have to make them a part of your life, right? Is that what you're asking? Basically, are there people that you can shun? Is that what you're asking? Okay, if you can't make peace and leave them alone and let them go on their merry way. Let's look at it this way. Were there people that Jesus couldn't make peace with that he walked away from? Did Jesus try to make peace with everybody? Okay, does that kind of answer your question? I don't think we have to put ourselves in situations of abuse. And we're going to cover that a little bit more because there are some abusive people, and I don't think we need to put ourselves in situations of abuse just in the name of Christianity. I think we need to do our best, just like Jesus did his best, but Jesus walked away from people. Right. Don't cast your pearls before swine. Very good. Anybody else? Yes, Paul.
I have a close friend. We were close in high school. And on quite a while after that, we were always close friends. And one day he and I got in an argument. And I have a pretty great memory. Well, one day
That's an awesome story. I would repeat your story, but I'm going to just tell everybody you need to talk to Paul and ask that story if you're watching, and you need to hear about that. I'm running out of time, and I got 2 scriptures I want to cover real quick. On your 4th page, there's 2 scriptures that teach us how to deal with each other in a scriptural manner. And you need to memorize these scriptures, not word for word, but you need to know what these scriptures say and what these scriptures intend for us to do. It says, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder, for anyone who murders will be under the subject of judgment. That all makes sense to us. But Jesus, as he's teaching on the Sermon on the Mount, he says, but I tell you, and underline these words, anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Underline those words. Anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. I want you to remember that the next time you're mad at me. I want you to remember that the next time you're mad at each other. I want you to remember that the next time you're mad at anybody that is in the church, whether it's leadership or somebody. If you're mad and you're angry with your brother, you need to remember we'll be subject to judgment. He goes on to say, because he talks about murder, and now he's talking about anger, and he's taking it another step. He says, anyone who says to his brother, Reka, which is empty-headedness or anything like that, it's a derogatory term, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of hell's fire. Underline, but anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of hell, of the fire of hell. And the reason why I want you to understand that is because what's going on in our heart is just as important as what's going on in our worship. Okay? And Jesus is changing the paradigm of the church right here. He's changing the paradigm of Christianity. He goes on to say, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, I'm going to tell you this. When you worship, if you're truly worshiping, if you have something against a brother or you have a relationship with somebody that's not been made right, it will come up during worship. God will bring it to your attention during worship. If you're mad about something or you're upset about somebody, it says if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. How important is it for us to have the right relationship with each other? This passage says that it's more important than our worship. And I want you to get that. Because if you're coming here on Sunday morning and you've got stuff against others, you're missing the point. Verse 25, settle matters quickly with your adversary. And that is just, I'm going to just underline that because I don't want to run out of time here. Looks like I've got a couple more minutes according to my watch. Matthew 18, 15 through 17. This is, those of you who grew up in the church are familiar with this passage, but I want to remind all of us of this passage that Jesus did not say these words just as something to say. This is rules to live by, okay? And we need to remember this. If your brother or sister sins against you, now, I added the word sister there, but the idea follows for sisters and brothers. If your brother or sister sins against you, go and show him his fault, just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you have won your brother over. If he listens to you, you've won him over. If you go to somebody and you say, hey, you did this and it wasn't right and so forth, then they say, okay, you're right, I messed up, I'm sorry. It's done. It's done. But let me say this to you. If you come to somebody, I'm going to pick on Carly right now. He hadn't been picked on all day, I can tell. If I go to Carly and I go, Carly, you did this, 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 and this, and you were wrong, and Carly looks at me and says, you know what, Neil, you're right. I don't continue to say, but Carly, you did this, this, and this, and keep pointing my finger at him. You restore the relationship and move on. That's what this is talking about here. It's not continually reminding Carly of what he's done wrong. It is a time to restore the relationship and make sure everything is right. Go and show him a fault just between the two of you. If he listens, you've won your brother over. Everything's settled. You don't need to go talk about it with other people. You don't need to rant and rave about it. You don't even need to go and celebrate that you've won that. Right? Because a lot of people think, well, I finally fixed him. I told him what was it. And that's not what this is about. It's about having loving relationships. In verse 16, now look at what it says in verse 16. But if he will not listen. Now, if he listens, that's the end of it. But if he will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. What you do if he won't listen is to go to the church and tell everybody what's going on, right? It's to go to your neighbors and talk about what a sorry person he is. That's not what it says here. It says you grab a couple of people, and I would say it'd be people that he would listen to, people that he trusts, people that he looks to for advice maybe. Grab those people and say, hey, come on, let's go talk to Carly, because Carly wouldn't listen to me. And I don't stand over Carly when he won't listen. I don't berate Carly. I don't do any of that. I just say, okay, let me get a couple of people. Let's talk about this again later. And that's what you do. So that in every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen, then tell the church. If he refuses to listen to him, the church, treat him as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Diane, that actually answers your question even more. We have a way to treat people that will not listen to the truth. All right, comments or questions before we close this out? All right, good, because we don't have any time for it. Thank you for your attention, and we'll pick up next week.